Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change, big or small. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Siria Gutierrez, along with my co-host, Melissa Robena. On this episode, we recap the last 13 episodes, talk about what brought us energy, and themes that have emerged since our last recap. This is another recap episode.
It's been a minute since we've done a recap.
It has been a minute. This is episode 25.
Last one we did was episode 11. So at 13 episodes we have to account for.
Yes.
There's a lot. So we've had guests on the show like Corpro, Sabrina, Marisa Lupo, Zach Mathers, and Lee Chambers on the show. And then we've had a slew of...
Trent Bray.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Trent was on there. And then...
just a slew of topical stuff as well, ranging anywhere from mindset to how do you handle your family during the holidays, the roles you play. So
basically it was the last quarter of 2020, and we started meeting new people, mostly outside of our bubbles. I know Sabrina is one of your friends that you grew up with, but other than that, just...
I think, looking back, having over 20 episodes under our belt now, what trends or themes have you observed in our episodes?
Off record, we've talked about mindset. Mindset has been a huge recurring theme. And when people wrap their head around changing their mind or viewing themselves in a different way, how they started to see the results that they wanted or having a better, more enjoyable life. I think mindset is just, it's huge. And that was the one topic too, back on episode 13, where we actually both landed on the same research, which had not happened up to that point.
Or since.
Correct.
I would have to say the same thing in terms of mindset. Specifically, the paradigm shift that happens, either operating out of a deficit mindset or, you're constantly hustling, and that making that shift from negative to positive. And once that they believed in themselves or found their purpose, that really propelled them to new heights in their career or their personal life.
There's been a lot of that. I think one of the really cool things about this venture that we've been on with podcasting is it is a networking activity. I hadn't even thought about that when we first started out. And so it's been really neat to just keep track of, or I don't know if track's the right word, but keep tabs on our guests and seeing what they're doing and what their journey's like. I mean, I love watching the Cork Bros content.
I follow them religiously. Andrew and I and Mike, we all message each other all the time, and I just love...
Dog diggity.
What up, dog diggities? Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. And so what's interesting is I would, reach out to them, and they just talked about how, they're really just following their passion. These past 2 months have just, they catapulted. They're just busy. And that's so good to see because they're just such nice gentlemen. I can say gentlemen because they're young.
Yes, and because we're so much older. I mean, we're probably like a decade older, or I am at least. But yeah, it's been nice to kind of see that and really just see how everybody else is doing it, because a couple of the people have their own podcasts or they have their own projects that they're working on. But just seeing how they approach this world of connecting through social media and through this other medium.
Well, my grandfather would always say life is built on relationships, and it truly is. We've used or had this podcast serve as a platform to, like you said, network, meet new people, learned a lot of new things, which feeds that growth mindset of mine of, learning something new. It's just been a really great experience.
I love that reframe, though, that you just said with your grandfather saying, it's an opportunity to build relationships. That's sounds better to me and feels better than saying, oh, we were networking, because networking has all of those like yucky, icky connotations to it. But we've been building relationships and we've made friends all over the world. And I mean, what hasn't happened in this last quarter for our listeners is we've recorded a ton of interviews. And so those are coming, and we've been trying to figure out how to get them on there, but we have been interviewing people literally all over the world. And our first international episode with Lee Chambers, right? Like that didn't drop until the new year. But before that, we had been interviewing people in the UK, Australia. I think we've gotten an inquiry from Asia, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. Canada, like that's fun to me.
Well, and even just looking at statistics, right? You and I have been looking at the statistics of our podcast, and I remember you're like, who the fuck do we know in Dallas? And I'm like, who cares about Dallas? Not that I don't care about Dallas. But, I was more...
Who's that person in South Africa that's listened to us?
I already know that. That's my colleague, Azelle. Shout out to you. But...
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
But it's like Sudan. Who in Sudan is listening to our podcast? That was like...
Hello, Russia. How do I say hello in Russian? I mean, it's just...
I don't know, but it was just so cool. And when you're looking at the graphic of all the countries that are listening to our podcast, it's amazing and such a remarkable feeling to say, wow, my voice or my story or these stories collectively are being shared with others around the world. That is so amazing.
It really is.
It's even more amazing to think about that considering where we're recording, which is in my small home office, and to think that this small little space has allowed us to do so much good that's being felt around the world.
Yes. Felt around the world, seen around the world, and especially in a time where we would like to be going around the world, but
Eventually. We'll get there.
we can't, right? Like even with everything that's going on, and at this point, vaccines are out and approved in the world, and so I think I'm certainly starting to see the end of the tunnel. I know it's still far away, but like there's a glimmer of light and hope, and I feel like this podcast has helped us connect with just people all over, and even in people who maybe haven't been guests, but friends who we haven't talked to in a while. I think that's been really fun.
Well, and that was something that had also surfaced for me too, is we're talking about connection. And yes, this podcast is served for us building new connections, but it also strengthening existing ones. And so I've had people that have listened to the show and have reached out to me and said, this episode really, really hit me hard. I can really resonate with it, and would, sometimes they just needed to vent or share their story, or just even share like, hey, you're doing a good job, keep going. And other times they were asking questions. How might I look at this situation? How might I reframe this? Or, hey, you've walked down a similar journey as me. What might you suggest? And so it's definitely helped strengthen those existing bonds, and it's just been nice to kind of reconnect.
I think it has. Definitely connection has been a big theme in this journey, right? I mean, even we've connected more. I see your face more than anybody else's besides Matt.
You're welcome.
I didn't say it was a bad face.
But I mean, so that's one amazing thing that has emerged as a result of the podcast. Looking back at the last 13 episodes, what episode stands out to you the most and why?
I would say one of my favorite episodes was Please Like Me, People Pleasing. I think that was one that when we got to the topic of it, we were super excited to record it. And I think it was one of the few that we named before we even recorded.
Was it?
Yeah. I think you came up with the title before we ever recorded. It was like, this is what it is, and we didn't deviate from it. But it was definitely something about, okay, hey, we're gonna do this, and it sounded to me, when I listened to it, I was like, oh, it just sounded so good. I felt so much pride in the work that we'd done, and it was us trusting our intuition and talking about things that we've experienced. We do a lot of research. We're smart women. We enjoy that process as well, but I felt like we weren't having to say that all the time. It was just us talking. It was a little bit more off the cuff, which we've done a couple of those episodes, and depending on what it is, it's either going to be good or it's not, and we just kind of roll with it and see how it goes. So I thought that one was one that really stood out for me. And same thing with like emotional consent. Those two episodes are on that same line of us trusting our intuition and talking about things that we really have a lot of experience with.
And that people pleasing was actually one of the episodes that I received a lot of engagement from people And I think it was because we were sharing our personal stories, because we walk the walk. I mean, I don't think that you and I are ever going to speak to something that we don't have some sort of experience with. I mean, we might, and we haven't crossed that road yet. But I think, if we're wanting people to take away something, listeners to start to feel a connection with us, we're able to do so in this medium by sharing our stories, because there might be listeners we're never going to get to meet. But if my story or your story can connect with someone in Russia or the Sudan, and there's a small piece of that episode that they can take away, walk away with, then I think that we've accomplished what we've set to do.
I agree. I think that that's a really cool aspect of it. You just don't know where your story is going to end up or who it's going to help.
I was going to say, you mentioned before that you don't know who needs to hear what you have to say, which I think comes back to why I believe sharing stories is so important.
Well, not only that, there are so many things that have been passed down as wisdom throughout the ages. You just don't know where you're going to get that piece of information from. It might be solid advice that has been passed down, from ancient times, but you needed to hear it, and depending on who's saying it, that's going to make a difference. If it's, two women of color saying it, we might reach a different audience that may not hear that message than if it's all coming from, if you're only receiving your messaging from, say, like Oprah. I love Oprah. It's not a criticism, but it's just, you don't know where you're going to find that information. We could be saying the same things that other people out there are saying, but it's because it's our voice delivering it to an audience who may not have the research or the inclination to want to go figure that stuff out. Like, we both very much like learning. That's one of our strengths. And we also like sharing. I love sharing.
Talking about sharing, one of the things or episodes that I really liked was family roles. Again, another audience favorite, because, everybody can kind of identify themselves as, yes, I'm the scapegoat, or I'm the mascot, or I'm the caretaker. And so for me, what I most enjoyed about the family roles was because having a better understanding of family dynamics helps me to see and interact with family members in a different way. So knowing, for example, that one sister is a scapegoat, and knowing what those characteristics are, how might I modify how I interact with that person or respond to that person? But it also has me looking or appreciating that person through a different lens. I have a little bit more empathy in my interactions with them, understanding that, there might be certain things that a person does that might trigger me, but understanding, okay, but that's because, they've played this role within the family their entire life. I can maybe understand why they cause trouble or make jokes at inappropriate times, or, you know what I mean? So for me, it really helped me look or appreciate my family in a different light. I also really liked, in the episode, we talked about family systems theory and how each member really has a role to play, and that, it's not until we disrupt those patterns and those behaviors that is anything really going to change. And I know that you and I talked considerably about, okay, well, that requires us establishing healthy boundaries. And what are those healthy boundaries? And, they're going to differ from person to person. But once you start to establish those boundaries and communicate those boundaries and reinforce those boundaries, will those dynamics begin to change. And in the end, you'll be happier and hopefully have a better and healthier relationship with your family members, which for me, being such a huge family person, that was really important to me. So that episode really resonated with me, and I, just was awesome. I really enjoyed that one.
And that makes sense. But what I really like about what you just pointed out was the relationship aspect of it. I mean, I know we call the podcast Pivotal Moments, but what we're talking about, I think, is a lot about relationships. What are these relationships that we have, not only with other people and our family members? We're building relationships, but we're also talking about the relationships we have with ourselves and how we can do things better to improve that relationship, where, we spend the most time with ourselves, and we have that little voice inside our heads. Everybody's got one that gives you that doubt, that tells you, what are you doing? You can't do those things. And just knowing, hey, you're not alone in the process. There's plenty of people who are going through the same thing, and here are tools or things that they have done to improve their path, or things that we have done, because like you said, it is all coming from a place of experience. I think the only thing that we don't speak on as much is on children, on having children, because neither of us have that, and we'll be addressing that a little bit more in some upcoming episodes. But it is something that we're mindful of hey, we're talking from our own experience, and we're sharing other people's experiences, which I'm so grateful that we've had these fantastic guests come on and just be willing to, show behind the curtain, because that's always the part that excites me. It's like, okay, let's really get behind it, and let's try to get to know you, not just all of your successes, although there's some pretty impressive people, especially some of our upcoming episodes.
Oh, I'm really excited. Yeah, and so just looking back though, out of everything that we've covered, topics or interviews, what is one thing that we've covered on the show that has energized you the most?
That's a good question. What has energized me the most?
For me, I'll just start off while you're kind of thinking about that. For me, that's self-awareness. As we conduct each interview and record each topical episode, I'm almost like tuning into who I am and my voice, and understanding maybe what triggers me, both good and bad. I know the word trigger is often associated with negative, but what prompts my moments of joy, what prompts my moments of inspiration. And for me, that kind of like ties into mindset. So the power of self-awareness can kind of lead down the road to mindset. So the power of mindset, to me, it never ceases to amaze me that once we have the attitude of nothing can stop me, nothing can truly stop you. And so, we're capable of building resilience to adversities that we experience in our life by creating a mindset that is positive, full of gratitude. But it's definitely something that constantly needs to be worked on. And I think that I'm able to continuously work on that because of this podcast and the people we connect with and the episodes or the topics that we cover.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question the way you asked it.
Because you're an attorney?
Maybe. That might have something to do with it. Just a little bit. Because the way I'm thinking about it is, it isn't necessarily something that stuck out, but it's more of something that I've learned along the process, especially in these last 13 episodes. I think there was a lot more discussion on our families and our roles within the family and our relationships. And so, in one of the episodes, we talk about, dipping our toes in the sea of our daddy issues, which it is a deep, deep ocean. But when I step back and I look at it, it isn't even just problems I have with my dad. It's problems that I have with both of my parents that now as an adult I can see, well, they're humans, and these are things that have come up with them. And so just knowing, hey, there are these things that have come up, and I'm not alone in it. You have them in your own version. Our listeners have them. Our guests have their issues. And that's okay. Like, there is nobody who is perfect. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, you and I went on a walk this morning, and we were kind of just like talking about life and how far we've come. And this podcast has served as a vehicle to kind of expedite these changes, these personal changes that we're seeing, not only in our mindset, but our self-awareness, our level of appreciation and gratitude. And it's because we're talking about things that could be uncomfortable. Like, I used to suppress my daddy issues. Now I'm very, very open with them. That's not to say that they're easy to talk about, because they're not. But by being able to bring to light certain things that have held me down has been very freeing for me. And this podcast has allowed us, like you mentioned, to talk about our family issues. But again, they're very relatable. Everybody, like you said, everybody has them. And family dynamics, you can't escape your family,
you could try.
I have failed.
Yeah.
So what else, if anything, stands out for you from our last recap to now?
I would say definitely we've had some fun energy in there. We also hit 1,000 episodes within this recap, so that was exciting. In this recap, this was when we joined a podcast community called She Podcasts, and that was a guest who told us about it. We didn't know about it beforehand, and it was cool because we've been able to kind of see our growth along with the growth of other female podcasters out there, and just getting more into this world. It is a fascinating world, and I think one of the things I love most about this process that we're in is there are no rules, guys. There are no rules. You want to make a podcast? Go for it. You want to talk about your favorite hobby, which is, frisbee golf, you know who I'm talking to. Go for it. You want to go and, if you want to share and you want to explore this, there are no rules. You set the rules. You set the tone, the frequency, whatever it is. And sometimes not having rules can be very scary, but it feels so freeing.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm very much, as I'm sure you could probably tell, I like having some sort of organization, rules, structure. I remember, like, even in college, a professor might be like, okay, well, I want you to write about, social psychology. I'm like, okay, well, so, like, what do you want the margins to be? Is there a word limit? Are you wanting like a 5-paragraph essay, intro, outro? Having too much freedom was scary at that time, but I don't know if it's just because I'm getting more comfortable within my skin or if I'm finding my voice. But you're absolutely right. The podcast platform definitely is very forgiving and very supportive. The podcast community is extremely supportive, as have our listeners been. But the thought of winging it still scares me a little bit, but I'm more inclined to do so, and it's been fine. The world hasn't ended. Well, kind of, but not because I'm ad-libbing it on an episode.
Mm-hmm.
So you're definitely right. There's a lot of creativity, and it's fun when it's not so structured. I think when we first started out, we had our show notes, and the first segment we're going to talk about this, the second segment we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to close it. But now it's just like, let's just hit record, Bill. Let's just see what happens. But I think the content has gotten better because of it.
Right. It has gotten, well, at least we like to think
We're
so.
biased.
You can tell us otherwise, dear listeners. But it is something where we do have a structure in mind. We have a topic of what we're doing, but we're a little bit more comfortable with the process. I think part of the reason that the Off the Cuff episode, emotional consent, was the first one we did that way. I really enjoyed that because it was something that just, you always talk about, in your work, what's bringing you the most energy, right? And as you've been helping me with some things at the law firm to try to build community, it's always that what has the most energy. And so that was one of those topics where we just had a ton of energy towards it, and we're like, let's do it now. And I think that came through in the recording, just that we were pumped up about it and curious to see where it would end up. And
daddy issues.
Daddy issues. It was all daddy issues all the time.
I think what gives me the most joy or energizes me the most is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode, which was that increase in listener engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's great that people are listening. I love it even more when they get to engage with us. I love to hear their feedback, their thoughts, how the episodes impacted them or how they found them insightful. I especially love it when they share their own stories, because then that's building that connection, that community that we so desperately hope to create, that safe space where people feel comfortable. And that isn't a testament to us that, okay, we're doing a good job. So seeing an increase in this has been so exciting and energizing for me, that it's really, I'm excited to see where we continue to go, onward and upward, Bobo.
I know. I'm excited about that. And I love when you're talking about that engagement, because we do get a lot of engagement on social media. But guys, we want to build a community, and we want to build it with you guys, so that way we can help you, you can help us, you can help each other. There are so many people that are going through these same struggles. And so if you guys, are up for it, come join us in our Facebook community group, because that's where we are going to build this awesome group of people who are there to help one another and just be real and just have that support.
And I think I want to kind of add to that, which is, it's not just talking about the struggles in life. I want this community to serve as a cheerleader for everyone that's in the group. You got a promotion, fucking post that shit. If you had, an issue with your significant other, let's talk about it. If you are, whatever it is, I want it to be good, the bad, the ugly, and in between, but I want there to be a community where you feel comfortable to share.
And to feel supported and nurtured. And that is my hope for this online community.
100%.
Dear listeners, as always, we want to hear from you. What is something we have covered on the show that has energized you the most? What episode stood out to you? Let us know in our private Facebook group, Pivotal Moments HQ. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening. Remember, it's never too late and you're right on time.